Hello, welcome to Good Morning Transfers. We are 3 days into the transfer window and we're starting to see plenty of movement. Are we about to have a resolution to Jadon Sancho's future, with Borussia Dortmund keen on signing the winger? Tottenham have been hampered by injuries this season. Details of a potential new defender coming to the club. And here's what we can look forward to today. First, we've got the latest from Manchester United and Jadon Sancho's future. At 9:15, we'll be discussing what Tottenham need to do in this window. And at 9:30, we'll be live to Scotland for the latest on any deals in the Scottish Premiership. And at 9:45, we'll look at which players are coming out of contract in the summer. A very good morning to you at home and to those watching on the Sky Sports Premier League YouTube channel, and to Harriet Pryor, Kwaku Afari and Nabeed Haroun. Right, we're going to start with Jadon Sancho. Borussia Dortmund are interested in signing the Manchester United winger on loan. Right, Harriet, give us a background to this.
A bit of a timeline of events. He signs in 2021, 73 million. And there was so much excitement about him coming from Dortmund. He'd had a really successful spell there, played 82 times for Manchester United, scored 12 times as well. And then it all came to a head with Erik Ten Hag, the manager, and he's not played since a 3-2 win against Nottingham Forest. Ten Hag basically criticised how he'd been in training, and that's the reason he gave for not selecting him in a squad. Sancho, of course, came out famously on social media and refuted those allegations, said that he'd been used as a scapegoat for a long time. And since then, there's not really been a resolution. They released a statement in the club in September saying that Sancho would be on a personal training programme away from the squad pending a resolution of a squad resolution issue. And we still, months on, don't seem to be any closer to the issue being solved. He's in a contract at Manchester United until 2026, and they have the option to extend that as well. So at the moment, it feels like they hold all the cards. However, having said that, the longer this drags on, the more his value is going down. It doesn't feel like, under Erik Ten Hag at least, he is going to be playing as a Manchester United player again anytime soon. So the options now that are coming up are a return to Dortmund, which we'll go on to speak about. But it's been a saga that's dragged on for a long time and doesn't seem any closer to finding a resolution.
Nabeed, does it seem like if he was to go out on loan to Dortmund until the end of the season, would that suit everybody?
I feel as though it's probably the best solution. He's been at Dortmund before. He knows what it's like at the club. He knows the people at the club. Obviously, the management has changed. But also the fans adore him in Dortmund, and he had a very good spell there. As for Manchester United, I think they've got a player there that's just not worked out. At this moment in time in January, they're going to get back the same fee. Probably not. He goes to Dortmund. If he plays well, they can probably get a larger fee come the summer. And then I think for Sancho, he just needs game time. I think a lot of people have suggested that maybe he's not interested in playing and things like that. I think the reality is he just hasn't worked out at Manchester United. He goes to a club that he knows quite well, gets game time, everyone's happy if it works out, obviously.
Yeah, what does everybody at home think about this Jadon Sancho situation at Manchester United, possibly going out on loan to Borussia Dortmund? Give us your thoughts. Hashtag transfer talk on X. Right, Kwaku, from Sancho's point of view solely, how much does he need this? Whether it's Dortmund or someone else, how much does he need to move?
He needs a fresh start. When we're talking about talent levels of English players, he sits on a table with Bukayo Saka and Phil Foden, just in terms of pure ability. We saw the trifecta of him, Haaland and Bellingham at Borussia Dortmund. That was one of the most exciting trios Europe has ever seen. But it hasn't worked out for him at Manchester United. He needs a fresh start. Obviously, we know about the breakdown of communication between him and Erik Ten Hag. And as a result of that, he's just not had enough football this season. He's played 3 games, all off the bench. Last season, obviously, he was involved in a lot more, but he wasn't the Jadon Sancho that we saw at Borussia Dortmund. So a fresh start in a country he knows very well, a club that the fans really still do love him, I think is the best for all parties, for him and for Manchester United. But as a player, I want to see Jadon Sancho get back to where he was, because he was one of the most exciting players we've ever seen at that age. And you look at his age mates, look at the players that he was compared to, they've gone on to achieve incredible things. And I think there's still players in there in Jadon Sancho who just needs to find the right club for himself.
It's interesting that it's looking like a loan, because I wonder whether that's from the club perspective, from Manchester United, whether they think if they sold him now, they wouldn't get the value for him from the player that he's worth. Because you speak about the talent that he has there, he's not been able to show that for quite some time. So if they opted for a sale now, do you think maybe they wouldn't retain the value that they got for him, or is it a loan option better for him? I don't know who this works out best for, rather than a permanent solution.
It's always difficult to do deals in January, isn't it? In terms of, you know, that so many players away because of various tournaments, whether it's the Asian Cup or AFCON. So to do a permanent deal for a player of the quality of Jadon Sancho, who may not have bought for a lot of money, invested a lot of money, and it's difficult to do. So loan makes sense at this point in time, but obviously United want to recoup as much money as possible for Jadon Sancho.
There's no doubt he's a quality player. We were talking, Kwaku, when the investment comes into Manchester United, there is talk of a new kind of policy coming in. Just explain what that policy may be. And when you do, surely it doesn't apply to someone of Sancho's age.
Yes, I mean, this Reddy actually reported last month that Manchester United will implement a more ruthless approach when it comes to the process of player contracts and getting rid of players that may be a surplus of requirements of the club. Similar to what Arsenal did when it comes to players like Ozil and Aubameyang, players that were maybe the other side of 30, had higher value contracts and the manager didn't fancy anymore. They were pretty ruthless in terms of terminating those contracts and moving on from those players. Jadon Sancho doesn't necessarily fall into that bracket. He's still only 23 years old. He's a player that has a lot of upside, and if he finds the right club, he can perform at the highest level. Man United can maybe recoup some of that high transfer fee that they paid for him. But it's an initiative brought in by Ineos to revamp Manchester United's whole recruitment process and revamp the way that Manchester United go around doing business. And so if you look at players like Ozil and Aubameyang, they had served Arsenal they'd been players that won trophies for Arsenal and been central to Arsenal being successful. Sancho's not quite at that level in terms of what he's achieved at Manchester United, so it wouldn't apply to him, but you can understand why, with this new ownership group coming into Manchester United, why they need to revamp things, because we've talked ad nauseum about how Man United are not great at selling players or buying players, and their ability to get rid of massive contracts is a huge part of that as well.
Yeah, and Nabate, I think you've been looking at some of the stats surrounding Jadon Sancho.
Yeah, so Jadon Sancho, as we just said, is an interesting proposition that Manchester United have at the moment. I think the perception around Sancho is that maybe at Manchester United he's not delivered. I'm more of the opinion that he hasn't probably had the opportunities. You can see here he's played 82 games, 12 goals, 6 assists. On the face of it, you're probably thinking, for a winger who came with so much potential and such a large fee, he hasn't really delivered, considering at Dortmund he had phenomenal stats, and also the system suited him at Dortmund. And what you'd find here is, in 137 games, 50 goals, 64 assists. I mean, those stats are exactly what Manchester United paid for. But if you look a little bit deeper, and this is where I think he's been very, very unlucky, in terms of 90s played per season, what this essentially means is the minutes he's played divided by 90. It just doesn't map out very well for him. If you look at his Dortmund, you have 8, 27, 25, 23. And at Manchester United, you've got 21, 19 and 1. Considerably lower. And the problem that he's often had is when he's bought into the side, Manchester United have been in turmoil. And in reality, a lot of Manchester United players have ended up in a situation where most people don't think they're at the level that they need to be. Unfortunately for him, he's ended up in that situation as well. He's only actually ever played 7 league games straight for United. That was when Ten Hag first came in. If you think back to that period, that was the defeats against Brentford and Brighton, the 6-3 against Manchester City. What can you actually expect from a winger that's come to a league that's, again, expecting so much of him, and then also in a team that's expecting so much, but a team that's underperforming? At Dortmund, even in his final season, when the feeling was that he was going to leave, he played 15 games straight in the league at a certain point. In those games, 7 assists, 6 goals. So this isn't a guy who's suddenly just forgotten how to play football. It's probably a guy who's come into a club under lots of pressure. He's under pressure. The team have got a new manager. It wasn't working out. Just think back to Manchester United losing to Brentford and Brighton. I think most people were sat there sort of saying, this team isn't good enough, they haven't got a style, etc., etc. And then you've thrown in a brand new winger. So I do feel for Jadon Sancho in the sense that, yes, the stats don't look great on the face of it, but if you look deeper in the minutes he's played and the situations and the games he's been in, he's ended up in a bit of a crossroads. And I think at this moment in time, the only way is out. And it may be that he goes to Dortmund, gets his career going again, gets that form back again, and then we might be going back to Sancho in a few years' time where maybe he might come back to the Premier League. But as it stands at the moment, I just don't see where Sancho goes next.
OK, Nabate, thank you. Well, we're asking you on the Sky Sports Premier League YouTube channel, should Sancho rejoin Dortmund? And you've had your say. 91% of you say he should leave Manchester United for Dortmund on loan in this transfer window. Now, we're told it'll be a quiet transfer window for Manchester United as far as incomings are concerned, but areas they are looking at are in the striking position and central defence. Before we get to that, though, they have decided to let Sergio Reguilón go back to Tottenham, ending his loan spell. OK, Harriet, why have they done that?
Well, he was brought in September following injuries to both Luke Shaw, the starting choice in the left-back position, and then also Tyrell Malacia. He's played 12 times in all competitions, but with Shaw back to fitness and Malacia also close as well, I think they just see him as a little bit surplus to requirements now. The second half of the season for Manchester United doesn't look like it will be as congested either, considering they've gone out of the Champions League now and the Carabao Cup as well. So United have triggered a break clause essentially to cut the loan spell short. And it feels like it's a good resolution for all parties, considering he probably won't be getting much game time at United if he were to stay there. He's only played for United this season, so under FIFA rules he still could play for another team, whether he decides to stay or get another loan move away. So all options are kind of open for him as a player at the moment.
Yeah, as for the striker situation, Stuttgart striker Serhou Guirassy is someone that they are aware of, and the release clause understood to be in the region of £15 million. The Nice defender, Jean-Claire Todibo, is a player they have scouted for a while, but his valuation could prove prohibitive in this window. Nabeed, with those two players, Guirassy and Todibo, would they be good signings for Manchester United?
Well, they need a forward. Guirassy has obviously been sought after by a lot of clubs in Europe, 17 goals in 14 games this season. The worry for Manchester United fans definitely has to be that this is the one standout season we've seen from him at Stuttgart. He's going to come into a pressure situation at Stuttgart. He's playing under no pressure. But ultimately, for £15-16 million, it's a bargain. And they need a striker, they need goals. And then centre-back-wise, Todibo obviously plays for Nice. Sir Jim Ratcliffe has involvement at Nice as well. So you'd imagine at some point that deal may work its way over. The Varane contract he's been talked about this week may not get renewed. Lindelof's going to get renewed. They've got Evans still in there, so they definitely need a centre-back and a striker. So it makes sense to make those signings. But like Kwaku and Harriet both said, in January, spending money is very difficult.
You've also got AFCON in January as well. So look at Guirassy, he's going to play for Guinea. It's tough. By the time he comes back, it's going to be mid-February. By the time he gets up to speed, it'll be the beginning of March. Manchester United need goals now. And so despite the fact that it is a bargain in terms of that buyout clause, it's just, I don't know if it's too much of a risk at this point in the season for Manchester United.
I just think they need goals. They don't score enough goals. I think they've scored 19 in the league. Even if he comes in for 10 games and scores 7 goals, I think for Manchester United, 15 million is not a big issue in that sense. It sort of reminds me a little bit of like when they signed Odion Ighalo, and he did very well for them actually in that period. They are desperate for goals.
Right, well, you mentioned Raphael Varane there. Well, he's entered the final year of his contract. He's free to talk to clubs outside of England ahead of a move in the summer. United do have the option to extend his contract by a further year, as Nabeed said, but as it stands, they're unlikely to do so on the current terms. So talks are continuing over a new contract, and he does remain part of Ten Hag's plans. That's Varane. As for Anthony Martial, he's entered the final 6 months of his contract. United have the option to extend for a further 12 months. As yet, no sign they will trigger the extension. It's thought suitable offers for the player would be considered. So, Kwaku, Varane and Martial, what can you see happening with those two?
Like you mentioned, Varane's entered the final year of his contract, and we're seeing that quite a lot with top players. Varane's won multiple Champions Leagues and he's a World Cup winner, but it's interesting that Manchester United allowed his contract to run down to the final 6 months where he's allowed to talk to other clubs. And you've seen it with Erik ten Hag this season that he's favoured Johnny Evans in some games over Raphael Varane. So it suggests that maybe surplus requirements, we understand that he's still in ten Hag's plans, but actions speak louder than words. And the fact that Johnny Evans has started games over Raphael Varane tells you where his future might lay. Look at Anthony Martial. He's a player that's been in Manchester United for too long. He's seen multiple managers come in and come out, and they've fancied him at a point and not fancied him at a point. He's a striker that came in, he had Ballon d'Or clauses in his contract. People were very, very excited to see where he could go. But again, they've depressed his value by keeping on the books for so long, and we talked about it so much. Manchester United are not great at selling players, and looks like in Raphael Varane and Anthony Martial, they're not going to recruit much for the fee either.
Nabeed, with Martial, if they trigger that extension, of course, he's still in his 20s. Effectively, he's worth a lot of money, but they haven't been able to sell him for the last three years. Do they trigger that extension and try to sell him for money, or do they just say, right, let him go?
They didn't have to cut their losses at this point. Because he went to Sevilla on loan, didn't quite work out. It felt like when he went to Sevilla, he'll go to Sevilla, he'll resurrect his career, and maybe he comes back to United, or he stays in Sevilla. They were desperate to bring him back to United, and now he's stuck here again. I don't think he's really in Ten Hag's plans. I think there's been a lot of talk about, definitely on social media, pre-season Martial will turn up. But that Martial, we're still waiting. So I just feel for Manchester United now, cut your losses and just move on. you can't keep holding on to these players, which is what they've done time and time
About that
again.
with so many different players, though, and that's the issue. And Ten Hag's had a bit of time now to feel like he can mould his squad and get rid of players he doesn't want. But still, we're talking about players who you feel like need to be shifted out and moved on. And that constant movement, that constant shift, and the constant not knowing whether players are involved in the plans or not. And then, you know, in summer, for example, we were talking about Maguire and the likelihood of him
and
leaving. McTominay as well, and then they're back in the mix. So for these players, Varane, for example, he might be thinking, well, I'm not in the mix now, but who knows what's going to happen in a couple of months' time. I think they need a level of stability and consistency both on the pitch and off the pitch, because that's what's really lacking, isn't it, at United? And you can talk about kind of managerial changes and everything, you know, in front of what's happening on the field, but behind the scenes, when things are so unstable, it's difficult to find that consistency. And hopefully with the kind of investment, everything, that things might settle and there might be more of a strategy like we talked about, but at the moment it's difficult to see where the direction which things are going in.
Now, if you are out and about, you can keep across all the latest transfer news on the Sky Sports website. Just scan that QR code which is on your screen right now. Some fresh news reaching us this morning. Borussia Dortmund have made an approach to sign Chelsea's Ian Maatsen on an initial loan. We understand the left-back is one of several players the club will listen to offers for this month. Chelsea would rather sell him outright than loan him. However, the idea of a loan must contain an obligation to buy. And according to Sky Germany, he's valued at around £26 million. Right, loads still to come on Good Morning Transfers. We'll reveal the stories making the back pages. Plus, will Tottenham sign a new defender this month? Welcome back. Time to take a quick look at some of the stories making the back pages this morning. We start with a story involving England and Manchester United goalkeeper Mary Earps. The Daily Mail are reporting she's considering a move abroad as her future at Manchester United remains unclear. She's in the last 6 months of her contract right now. Now, the Eye say that Newcastle United are determined not to be too reactive to their injury issues and stick to a long-term plan in the transfer market, meaning a move for the Manchester City midfielder Calvin Phillips could be in doubt. And finally, in the Daily Telegraph, also regarding Newcastle, they say that Lewis Hall is poised to stay at the club following his initial loan from Chelsea, despite failing so far to break into Eddie Howe's starting lineup. So that's this morning's newspapers. Let's go to Tottenham now, who are hoping to bring in a defender this month. And according to Sky in Italy, Genoa's initial valuation of Radu Dragusan was £30 million, but Tottenham made a verbal offer in the region of £20 million. The Italian club now consider him to be worth more like £26 million, and negotiations over his valuation continue. It looks like progress is being made, at least. Right, Radu Dragusan, Nabe, tell us all about him.
Well, the first thing to know is the feeling in Genoa is that he's like a Virgil van Dijk regen. I want to clarify, he's not, before Liverpool fans get on the internet and probably on the YouTube right now and go, no way, there's no one like Van Dijk. But definitely in terms of stature, in terms of composure, in terms of his ability in possession, there are some similarities. Of course, not to the level of Van Dijk. There isn't almost anyone like him. But in terms of what Spurs are after, he's very good at defending in a high line. He's rapid over a short distance, maybe a little bit like Mickey van der Ven in that sense. But then if you look at sort of like, I think the criticism of Romero is he's been a little bit rash at times. Dragusan's not that at all. He's extremely composed. He'll put his body on the line. He's a warrior, leader of men type character, but he's not someone who's going to throw himself into challenges, and suspensions have been a big issue for Spurs this season. Udogie, Bissouma and also Romero. So that probably won't be an issue for them. But I think in terms of stylistically, it feels like Ange's going to get another transfer absolutely nailed on.
Yeah.
Leader of men, warrior. What words?
No, hang on.
Wow.
The new Van Dijk.
The new Van Dijk. That's not what you were saying.
Not what I was saying, Tom.
he clarified it. Yeah, but no, it sounds like it would be a great addition to Tottenham, though. I mean, Tottenham fans, let us know what you think. Centre-back, we know that you want one of those. What other positions on the pitch would you like to strengthen, Tottenham fans? Hashtag transfer talk on X, and we'll read as many out as we can. Kwaku, why do they need a centre-back, though? What are their current options?
You hear Ange Postecoglou every single time he's asked about new signings. He says centre-back, centre-back, centre-back. It's clear that Spurs are short in that area. If you see the lineups they've had to go with, sometimes it's Emerson Royale with Ben Davies, two players who ply their trades as fullbacks ordinarily. You talked about Cristiano Romero in terms of a bit rash and perpetually suspended or injured. Mickey van der Ven, who had a great start to the season, but we haven't seen him since the Chelsea game, which was since in November. He pulled up with an injury there. And so Spurs are struggling in that position. They're quite short. Like I said, Ben Davies has played there. I think he's better suited on the left side of the back three as opposed to playing as one of the two centre-backs. Eric Dyer is out of favour. He's only played in 4 games this season. And the youngster Ashley Phillips, who's more of a project, they brought him in for fairly sizable money from Blackburn, only made 2 appearances in the season. They're both in the EFL Cup. So Spurs clearly need reinforcements in the centre-back position. And Dragusan looks like a player that, based on the profile that Raid's outlined there, will fit in and complement the pieces that they've already got perfectly.
Yeah, young Alfie Dorrington's been on the bench as well, who is a centre-back, but Ange Postecoglou has been clear that he would like to strengthen in that area. What else do they need, Harriet?
Yeah, the priority is obviously a centre-back for all the reasons you listed. So I think if they get that done, then they might start looking to other areas. And the other areas I think Postecoglou would like to strengthen are in midfield and also a winger. Sky Sports News have reported continued interest in Conor Gallagher. That dated back to the summer. Maybe throw to you quick, I'm really surprised that Chelsea fans, some seem kind of happy to let Conor Gallagher go. From a club perspective, I don't really think that makes sense, but I know financially it kind of balances the books for them. There's also the idea of taking Postecoglou's former Celtic player Jota on loan from Al Ittihad, and that's not been ruled out as well. But I think they'll also have to focus on outgoings. And I remember in summer, every single week, we'd bring up that long list of players who Tottenham were trying to shift. They got a bit of that work done in the summer, but I think January will be a good time for them to focus on getting players that are out of favour and not getting much game time out the door, so that come summer they maybe have the funds available to look at a striker, because obviously Harry Kane left last summer. They look at other areas they want to strengthen, like I mentioned, a winger and midfielder. But yeah, Conor Gallagher seems to be the name at the moment that's coming up. But for Chelsea fans, what's the feeling? What's the sentiment around that?
Don't wind him up, Harriet. Don't wind him up.
It's, yeah. It would, I can't say what
I think I failed in that task, Tom.
But it's Chelsea can't afford to let a player like Conor Gallagher go to Spurs when they know that they desperately need reinforcements in that position. Obviously, they lose Basuma and Pepe Sarr potentially to AFCON this month. Bentancur suffered injury problems recently, and midfield is a position that Spurs need extra bodies in. Conor Gallagher, we know about his running statistics, we know about how important and how vital he's been for Chelsea this season. And you see the players absent for Spurs for various reasons, whether it's because of the Asian Cup or AFCON. Spurs need bodies in, whether that's in centre midfield or centre-back, and Conor Gallagher's the man that can do a lot of things in that midfield, and there's no wonder why he's linked with a club like Spurs.
Very measured, wasn't it? Very measured.
It was very. I mean, look at that, Harriet. I mean, there's not having it great Tottenham with that, and then you had AFCON and Asia Cup as well.
Yeah, Postecoglou said we've had to cope without significant players so far, but when you're a team who is kind of exceeding expectations a bit this season, I think they're performing a lot better without Harry Kane than many expected. They're pushing for a Champions League spot now. They can't afford to have a month when they have got key players missing because of AFCON and the Asia Cup as well, and then the injuries are stacking up as well. We've seen how much it's damaged them in the short term when they have had injuries to key players, as it would to any team. But losing these key players as well, particularly Son, their captain, in January, you'd have to think will have a big impact. However, having said that, the other side of things is I don't think they'll be pushed into a market and get a panic buy for something that's relatively short term, because their new strategy does seem to be to get players who are younger, that have got a future, that will be able to develop at Tottenham. So I don't think Postecoglou will look to bring in someone that won't be, past this season. I think they'll want to bring in players that are longer term, but there's no doubt that January is going to be a difficult period for Tottenham.
Right, some breaking transfer news to bring you now. And the Brighton winger Jeremy Sarmiento has joined Championship side Ipswich on loan for the rest of the season. Ipswich, of course, second in the Championship. They want some reinforcements to make sure they stay in those automatic promotion places and get into the Premier League next season. So he's a 21-year-old Ecuador international. And you'll remember he spent the first half of the season on loan at West Brom, where sometimes he looked unplayable. 21 appearances, 7 of those were starts. He scored 2 goals. One of them was one of the goals of the season. But Sarmiento no longer at West Brom. He was recalled by Brighton. Now he's been sent back out on loan to the Championship, but with high-flying Ipswich. Now, loads on the way, including the latest from the Scottish Premiership. Plus, we'll chat Liverpool, Aston Villa, and many more in a few minutes' time. quick line to bring you from the Championship. We understand Middlesbrough are interested in signing Leeds defender Luke Ayling. He's out of contract in the summer. But now, as promised, let's get to the Scottish Premiership and bring you up to date with all the latest stories. And joining us live now is our reporter, Mark Benstead. Good morning to you, Mark. We know that Celtic, they were impressive last night, weren't they? They beat St Mirren, but how urgent is their need to do any business this month?
Morning, Tom. Yeah, on face value, you'd say they don't need to do too much. They won in the Old Firm game. They won that game quite convincingly yesterday, and they do sit atop the Premiership table. But I think there is work for Celtic to do in this window. First and foremost, they have to fend off any interest in their best player this season in Matt O'Reilly. 10 goals from midfield. He's been the star turn, and there are a number of clubs monitoring him, so they have to try and retain him, which I think they will do. Beyond that, it's can they supplement the squad? Brendan Rodgers has said they want one or two bodies in. Ideally, one would be in a forward position. The need for cover there has been slightly lessened by the fact that Kyogo Furuhashi hasn't been selected in the Japan squad for the Asia Cup, but they are losing Dejan Maeda to that tournament, and they wanted cover anyway. So that's one area they may look to try and do business. And the other might be at left back. They're kind of slightly shy of cover there anyway, but Alejandro Bernabeu, who is there, hasn't really worked since he joined the club, and there's talk he may move on. So if that was to happen, they definitely need to try and bring someone in. Thiago Araujo of Estoril has been linked. He is more of a wing-back, a winger, but he could offer something on that side. Either way, though, I think it certainly will do something in this transfer window.
And what about Rangers? They've already got one new face in. Are we likely to see any more?
Yeah, Fabio Silva's joined on loan from Wolves. He made his debut yesterday for the final 20 minutes of their victory against Kilmarnock. He's someone that the manager's keen to bring in. He thinks he can offer something, but I don't think he's going to be the constant goal threat that perhaps Rangers desire. You look at his track record, 5 goals in 72 appearances for Wolves. He's not prolific. He's more of a creative force, a dynamic force. He doesn't score the goals necessarily. So they need cover beyond that, and especially when you factor in that Abdallah Sima is now off to join Senegal at AFCON. So yeah, there's an urgency for Rangers to bolster to their attacking options. They may need to cover as well at left back too, because there's reported interest by Sky Italy from Verona in the left-back Ridvan Yilmaz. So that's one to watch as well. One player they have been linked with is Milian Manhoff of Vitesse Arnhem. He's more of a wide attacking player than a main striker, but he could be someone to keep tabs on over the course of this window. There might be one or two outgoings. I mentioned the interest in Yilmaz. Someone like Scott Wright as well may move out potentially. He almost left in the summer to Turkey. That move fell through. He stayed and made a contribution, but he could be someone that may look to move on this window.
Away from the Old Firm, there's two strikers who I presume are attracting plenty of interest. Lawrence Shankland and Bojan Miovski, two players who've done really, really well this season and before that as well. Are we likely to see them leave?
Yeah, interest potentially in both. Both have caught the eye. There are similarities and differences between the two players. Both have scored a lot of goals. Lawrence Shankland, 19 for club and country this season. Miovski, 16 for club and country this campaign. Both have caught the eye. Both are talismanic figures for their clubs. And both are under contract for a considerable amount of time. But there is a key difference in as much as I think Hearts believe they can retain the player. They have no intention to sell the current captain, and indeed they are making moves to offer him an improved deal to try and retain him. There's a slight difference with Miovski is that he was always bought with a view to then being sold on down the line. Aberdeen want to develop the player trading model, so it's more likely he would go over Shankland. That said, I think it would be very surprising if either was to move in this transfer window. Beyond those two, forward players are a big talking point within the league generally. I spoke to the Kilmarnock manager Derek McInnes yesterday. He's keen to bring in someone with pace at the top end of the field for him, and bottom side Livingston desperate to do a bit more business this window if they can. They want another forward player in, someone to bring a bit of creativity and link midfield to attack. The problem they have is they are bottom of the league, and it's hard to convince players to come in to a side that find themselves in that position. But the key thing here in Scotland is, of course, we've got a winter break just now. That gives clubs a couple of weeks to get their squads in shape for the second half of the season.
No winter break for Sky Sports News reporters, though. Mark, thank you. Especially in the transfer window. Right, it's time for our 5 in 5, where we talk about 5 clubs in 5 minutes. And you can see the 5 we're going for today. Starting, Harriet, with Liverpool.
Is there a countdown clock, the time pressure? OK, Liverpool, unlikely they always say to sign players in January, but it's kind of always their line. But as we saw last year with Cody Gakpo, if the opportunity arises, I do think there may be something in the defensive areas, considering the long-term injury, the ACL injury to Joel Matip. He was starting alongside Virgil van Dijk as that centre-back partnership. They have got other options. Konate has now stepped in, but I do think longer term they will look to replace Joel Matip. He's out of contract in the summer as well. And then also maybe an option at right-back, because Trent more and more has been moving into that kind of inverted midfield position. Maybe Klopp would like to see him play there solely. He sometimes has put Joe Gomez at right-back to allow Trent to play solely in that midfield position. So perhaps longer-term, a right-back solution so that Trent could move permanently into the midfield.
Well, Liverpool are top of the league, so it makes sense that we go to the team who are second in the league next, Quaker with Aston Villa.
Surprisingly second in the league, and they're looking to capitalise on a strong start to the season and hopefully secure Champions League football for next season. Right back's a priority for Aston Villa, given that Ezri Konsa's been covering Matty Cash in that position. And attacking midfield as well is where they could also bolster their lineup. John Duran, their striker, is linked with a move to AC Milan, and if he does make that move, it'll leave Ollie Watkins as the only out-and-out striker at Aston Villa, so they may be in the market for a front man. But if you look at the way the Villa have started this season, it's been perfect, and it's been a mix and a blend. They've been able to bring players in and out of that team. But right back and attacking midfield, and potentially a striker if John Duran does move on to AC Milan, is a priority for Aston Villa.
OK, yes, Aston Villa in second. Arsenal in fourth place. Nabeed, do you expect them to be doing anything this month?
I think Arsenal are in a strange situation because I think Christmas Day, they probably would have said we don't need to sign anyone. And now they want a left-back, a central midfielder, a striker. I think the ongoing conversation is around Ivan Toney to Arsenal, and I think that is the one area that Arsenal, if they definitely want to win the league, they need to bring in a number 9 who can score goals and take chances, so they're not in this situation where Gabriel Jesus misses a chance and they're sort of saying, oh, if that went in, something could have been different. Ivan Toney hasn't played for a long while. Brentford have sort of mentioned that it could be upwards of £80 million. I don't know if Arsenal can afford that in January, but if they want to win the title, Ivan Toney is the route to signing their name on that trophy again.
By the way, do you both agree that if Arsenal get a striker, they have a significantly better chance of winning the league?
I don't know how much it would really elevate them. I think they've got two options there. Maybe they want a different profile of striker. I wonder whether Ivan Toney, though, just will pay a little bit of kind of repay to Brentford because they've supported him through a difficult period. I feel like he's going to stay there until at least the summer and then look to get a move away.
I agree.
Yeah, we might come back to Ivan Toney in about a minute's time. But we're going to go back to Merseyside now with Everton, Harriet.
Yeah, back to Merseyside. Financial problems continue to hamper Everton, and I think that will be the same situation when we look ahead to January. And there's more likely to be outgoings, but they'll really want to keep hold of some key players. Jarrad Branthwaite, who's really impressed this season, there's been some interest in him. Onana as well is on the short list of many clubs. I think the priority, if the funds do become available, will be at centre-back and also a winger, but they will look to shift out a few players to make some funds available. Whether those funds will be used in the short term in January or whether they'll save them up and see what they can do in the summer, hopefully, if they continue their stint in the Premier League. They'll kind of look to do more then, but yeah, financial problems are holding them back a bit at the moment.
Do you think with Everton, if you take away their points deduction, which I know we can't, but they would actually be 12th and would be
doing the maths
11 points clear of relegation? Do you think their most important thing is just the fact that they've got a great manager?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything's gelling this season. I think there's a really good stylistic fit between the players he's got now and how Sean Dyche wants to play. He really wants to play that direct style of football on the transition. He's got the players now that are able to do that. They brought in a few clever signings in summer on a restricted budget. I think they did really well with that, and that's paid off this season with the results. And like you mentioned, without that point deduction, they'd be very comfortable in the table, and absolutely any Everton fan would have taken that come the start of the season. So yeah, on an upward trajectory, I think.
I don't know why it took me so long to add
quick
10
maths, and
to
you've only got
1
5 minutes. It's a lot going on.
To get to 11. Brentford, though, 4 points above the bottom 3. Kwaku, albeit with a game in hand. What do you think?
Their struggles have been well documented, especially recently. They've been ravaged by injuries. In terms of what they need, a left winger and a backup left back as well, to just bolster that squad. Ivan Toney will feel like a new signing for Brentford when he does return to the squad. They've desperately missed him. Johan Wies's also going to AFCON as well. He's chipped in with goals this season.
Injuries
so the return
in that forward line, haven't they?
Yeah, they really, really have, and it's difficult for them. They were looking at signing Diao from Real Betis in the summer. They're again looking at him this January. They're just a squad that need their players back from injury, and when they do, I think we'll see Brentford return to where they were last season.
That was exactly 5 minutes. Well done. Right, 5 in 5. We'll be back tomorrow, but still to come, David Moyes updates us on West Ham's transfer plans. Will they sign a winger this month? David Moyes has said that West Ham will not have much to spend in January, but admits additions would be a welcome bonus to his squad in the second half of the season.
I don't think we'll have much money to spend, I really don't, so I'm not sure. I think it might depend on what the outgoings are, possibly. I think everybody knows, we know that probably we could do with probably going again. How do we go again? I'm not saying that we won't actually believe that we will if the right things are there for us or could be got. Probably you hear it from all the managers, it's not a brilliant window, January, quite quick, not a great deal of availability, but it doesn't mean to say, probably saw it tonight, I mentioned we probably brought in Jared Bowen and Thomas Souček in January before, so it's not to say that could we find another two players like that, but let's be fair, we were probably as a team probably at a completely different level than where we are now, so maybe to get the players who you think are going to be good enough to be, or better to go directly into your team. Or are you just saying that you're looking for things which are underneath, which are better than what you've got? Probably have to say that it probably costs a lot of money, probably, for them all. But, hey, that's football now, that's what we have to do. So we want to keep building. We definitely have to try not stop. And hopefully, if the right ones come available, we'll try and do it.
Yeah, we understand one of the key areas that David Moyes would like to strengthen is in that wide forward area, and we're told that if someone does become available, then either Saïd Benrahma or Maxwell Cornet could be allowed to leave. So let's start with that before we go into defenders, actually, Kwaku. Wide forward there should not be a striker. We've been saying this for West Ham for a long time.
Yeah, I think it should be a striker, but West Ham, they've been scarred by strikers. Obviously, the Scamacca project didn't work, and Mikel Antonio's been out since November with a knee injury. Jarrod Bowen's been playing down the middle effectively for West Ham this season, having the season of his life, scored 11 league goals in 17 games, one of the top scorers in the league this season. But West Ham do need a striker. They need an out-and-out striker. We see that players have been shifting positions. So as a result of Jarrod Bowen playing down the middle, you now see Lucas Paqueta playing out wide. And again, he's been great there, but that's not his primary position. And for West Ham to get to the next level, and you heard David Moyes talk about it there when he said they brought in Jarrod Bowen and Thomas Souček in previous January transfer windows, but they're now at a level where they want to push for European football every single year. And to do that, you need to bring in a striker that can score consistent goals. The problem for West Ham, and the problem for most teams looking for strikers, is there isn't many about. There are not many strikers that can guarantee you goals in the Premier League. And you're going to have to take a risk on somebody if you are looking to strengthen that position. Out wide, we obviously know about Saïd Benrahma, who's looking to move on for West Ham if they can find a replacement. But striker is the position that West Ham need to improve in my opinion. It's
difficult also to be a striker for a David Moyes team. Like Jarrod Bowen at the moment is effectively a winger playing up front, and the reason that works is because he's willing to run the channels constantly, because that's the sort of profile he is. And now, is Jarrod Bowen going to be happy to move back out wide? Because they've got Kudus now, who prefers playing off the right-hand side. So now they've got a few sort of pieces that have worked quite well. I do wonder if he now goes, can I get a striker in, and have to shift other things around to make it work?
Yeah, makes sense. As for at the back, where Monaco are in advanced talks with West Ham to try to get Thilo Kehrer on loan until the end of the season, and also an unnamed, at the moment, Saudi Pro League club are interested in signing Nayef Aguerd. So that's two defenders that could be out the door at West Ham. What are their current options, Nabeed?
Well, they've got Ogbonna, who's currently 35 years old, Kurt Zuma, who's 29. The Nayef Aguerd one is a strange one, because I felt like when they signed him, that was to take them to the next level. It was the sort of signing that Moyes was just speaking about, a ball-playing centre-back, dominant in the air, pretty quick over 4 or 5 yards. He has played 16 league games this season. He has had injury issues, which I think he's sort of gone beyond now. But then the Saudi Pro League comes in, and as we know, they have the funds to sign anyone they want, essentially. But then I do think you lose one of those guys that he's saying we wanted to upgrade towards, and then you're sort of trying to fill in the gap as best as possible. And I feel like that deal, we haven't actually seen the full fruits of that deal yet. And so I think if West Ham can keep hold of Nayef Aguerd, they're probably heading in the right direction, because Nayef Aguerd alongside Zoom is a good pairing.
I would say, though, that in terms of David Moyes, he's very risk-averse. And you look at Aguerd, you look at Kehrer, who's linked to be moved away as well. They are great defenders, but they do sometimes make mistakes. And I don't necessarily think that suits a David Moyes system, where he wants the defenders to properly defend and not necessarily concentrate on ball-playing abilities. And Aguerd is a player that we thought would take West Ham to the next level, but the way that Moyes has taken West Ham to the next level is kind of unconventional in modern football. They're a more pragmatic team, and so defenders like that might not necessarily fit a Moyes system.
I think he's actually gone in reverse to where maybe they were trying to go. So they signed Paqueta, they signed Nayef Aguerd, and we thought their style was going to be more expansive. And I think he actually reverted back to type. That's now worked, and so he's now sort of going, well, I don't actually need these pieces anymore, because we don't need to play sexy football. We can just play the football we always play.
I don't know, I giggle there at sexy football, didn't you? It was Ruud Hullit's phrase, wasn't it, back in the day when he was at Newcastle. Meanwhile, West Ham defender Vladimir Coufal is not happy with his current contract situation, and feels he deserves a better deal. We've been told that. Now, if a better deal is not forthcoming, it's thought Coufal wants the club to consider any offers during this January transfer window. The club have triggered the one-year option in his deal, meaning that rather than the 6 months left to run, he's now got 18 months left to run. Right, talking about players who, well, he would have been free at the end of the season. Let's talk about players who will be free at the end of the season. And you've all picked a player each who will be out of contract at the end of June. And Harriet, I think you've gone for the obvious one here.
It's a never-ending saga, isn't it? We can't have a transfer show without talking about Kylian Mbappe. Real Madrid, obviously the team with the long-term interests. That move still hasn't happened, and we were talking about it in summer. Would it happen? And obviously Mbappe was pushed aside, wasn't he, training with the kind of B team, didn't go on the pre-season tour, was reintegrated back into the squad in August. He extended his contract in 2022, 2 years, with the option of an additional year. But normally it's the club who have the option to trigger that extension. But in this case, it's actually the player himself who could decide whether he wants to trigger that additional year. It seems unlikely he'll activate that option. But then for PSG, the worst case scenario is that they lose him in summer on a free. 6 months to go now, and he's able to talk to clubs outside of France and negotiate a free transfer. Will he trigger that extension so that he'll move in summer for a fee? Does he just want to push that move through to Real Madrid now? Because obviously it looked like he wanted to do that in summer and the move didn't get done. It's a really, really interesting one. I'm interested whether you guys think he'll be playing come, well, the start of next season, I suppose.
Well, it feels like Groundhog Day, really, with Kylian Mbappe. We talk about this every single window. I think culturally for PSG, it'd be a huge blow to lose him, and that's why they'll pull out all the stops and you'll see them offer him an unprecedented contract to keep.
Just time now, though, surely. He's really... when a player themselves suggest that they want to get that move away, do you think even culturally it's important to keep him that much?
He suggested that every single window when we've been sat here. I think it's a repeated cycle of, like, I think he's actually at the point where they can't offer him anything anymore. Like, they've offered him everything and he's still saying, like, I'm pretty much done.
It's a legacy thing, isn't it, though?
Yeah.
I don't think for him, because he had the option to talk to Saudi Arabia and negotiate a move there, and even financially, that we know how lucrative that would have been for him. But he wants to create that legacy for himself. He wants to win trophies and Champions League, and I just feel like now is the time for him to step away from PSG. And that Real Madrid move, surely it has to happen at some point. We can't just keep talking about it.
Toni Kroos leaving a legacy?
Probably one of the most underrated midfielders I've ever seen play the game. He's only 33 still. He still can play pretty much for any team in Europe. And I actually think Manchester City, Toni Kroos, I feel like there's something happening there. There was a conversation, I think, last window, actually, that they wanted a little bit of a stopgap deal for him. I do wonder what he does next, because he's sort of completed football. And a lot of people might suggest maybe it's time to call it quits.
Wilfred Ndidi?
Yeah, baffling that Leicester have let his contract run down to the final 6 months. He's played in a more advanced position for them this season. He's chipped in with goals and assists as well. And we saw them let Yuri Tillemans go on the free last summer. They can't afford to let another key player go for nothing again.
Right, OK, Good Morning Transfers back at the same time tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with the team. I've got plenty more to come today as well, because we're back in a couple of hours' time for Transfer Talk at midday, and joined by French football expert Jonathan Johnson, joining us live from Paris, and a full roundup of the day. Transfer news and the transfer show at 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. And some news just into us, by the way. We were telling you about Ian Maatsen maybe going to Borussia Dortmund. Talks are progressing, we are told. And it would be a loan with an obligation to buy. At the moment, the sticking point is how much that obligation loan, the fee would be. Next up, it is the football show.